Hello everyone. Welcome to the channel, The Formula for Success and Wealth, where you learn how to build assets and live smartly. I'm a multimillionaire, and I neither own a house nor invest in real estate. But why isn't a house a good investment? Isn't buying property supposed to be an excellent way to use your money? And surely it must be better than throwing money away on rent, right? Actually, when you break down the numbers, that often turns out not to be true. I've been saying this for years, whether on my podcast, in my book, or even on my Netflix show. You've been misled about home ownership, and in this video, I'm going to explain the 4 key points you need to understand so that by the end, you'll have a clear picture of the real costs of buying a house and know what steps to take. Starting with part 1, the dream you were sold. What does the American dream look like? If you're like most people, you probably imagine a single family home with a white picket fence, 2.5 kids, and a dog. Think about it. This isn't a coincidence. Where did this dream come from? It was the result of decades of advertising campaigns. Some would even call it propaganda, pushed by organizations like the National Association of Realtors, one of the most corrupt groups out there, recently ordered to pay over $1 billion in lawsuits. To explain further, most people around the world don't live in single-family homes like in the US, yet we're led to believe this is the ultimate symbol of success. Now, let's look at the numbers. Several decades ago, during your parents' or grandparents' time, a home cost about 2.5 times a person's annual income. A 20% down payment was standard, and monthly payments covering the mortgage, maintenance, insurance, and taxes would not exceed 30% of gross income. Using real figures, if you earned $50,000 a year before taxes, your house should cost around $125,000. Can you think of any decent house today you'd want to live in that costs $125,000? And under those conditions, you'd put down $25,000, and your monthly payments would be about $1,250. Have you ever seen a house like that recently? Of course not. The situation has changed dramatically, yet we still operate under outdated assumptions, passed down without adjustment to the current reality. And that doesn't even begin to explain the craziness of people buying homes worth 5 to 10 times their annual salary with barely 3% down. I'm highlighting this because when you purchase something you truly can't afford, it may seem like you're achieving the American dream, but often it leads to major problems later. Which brings us to part 2, the myths about owning a home. There are 4 big myths around home ownership that you should be aware of. The first myth is that real estate always appreciates. That's simply not true. You'd think people would have learned this after the 2008 crisis. But powerful forces, like the National Association of Realtors, family, and even the government keep pushing the idea of home ownership. While many asset prices rise due to inflation, the real estate market, which lacks transparency, uses hidden strategies like disguised discounts, rate reductions, or other methods to mask real declines, perpetuating the myth that prices only go up. The second myth is that home values double every 10 years. This is not consistently true, and even when it happens, people often ignore the hidden expenses, the so-called phantom costs. These include closing costs, property taxes, homeowners insurance, repairs, maintenance, trips to home improvement stores, and the value of your personal time. Not to mention the opportunity cost of the down payment, which could have been invested, for instance, in a low-cost S&P 500 index fund. As a result, you might sell your home for more than you paid and still lose money after accounting for all the hidden costs. It's not as simple as subtracting the purchase price from the selling price to calculate profit. You have to include all expenses to find the real return. The third myth is that leverage multiplies your money. There's some truth here, and many property owners emphasize leverage as an advantage. You could invest $20,000 into a $100,000 house, and if the value rises to $120,000, you would have doubled your investment. However, leverage works both ways. If the property value falls by 10%, you don't just lose 10% of your investment. You could lose everything. Real estate prices don't only rise, they fall too, and leverage can either help you or severely hurt you. The fourth myth is that mortgage interest payments are fully tax deductible, leading to huge savings. While tax breaks are nice, people often forget they're saving on expenses they didn't need to incur in the first place. It's like spending $1 just to save 10 cents. In many cities, owning a home costs far more than renting a similar place, especially after factoring in all phantom costs. Moreover, mortgage deductions were significantly reduced after 2018, making them less attractive. When you ask people which deductions they're entitled to, most can't even explain what qualifies or how it applies to their living situation. Now that you can spot the real estate propaganda and understand the major myths, what should you do? That brings us to part 3. Always run the numbers. You've probably heard people say, if you rent, you're throwing money away, or you're just paying your landlord's mortgage. Let me ask you, would you say the same thing about eating at a restaurant? Would you claim you're paying the restaurant owner's mortgage by having sushi? Of course not. So why is it so common to hear that about housing? Because someone coined the phrase, it caught on, and now it's mindlessly repeated. People feel uneasy thinking they're paying off someone else's mortgage, yet they don't feel the same when spending money elsewhere. Whether it's buying paper, towels, or renting a home, you're exchanging money for value received. Now, this is especially important in expensive cities like New York, Los Angeles, and San Francisco, places where I have lived. In these markets, buying a home can end up costing far more than renting, and financially, it might not make any sense at all. I'll give you an example. When I lived in New York, I closely monitored the real estate market. I was renting a nice apartment and noticed that an identical unit, same view, same size, same number of bedrooms and bathrooms, was available right next door. I tracked the prices and realized that owning it would cost about 2.2 times more than continuing to rent. Suppose my rent was $3,000 per month. To purchase the property, my monthly payment would jump to $6,600. So, what did I do? First, I actually enjoyed being a tenant. If anything went wrong, all I had to do was send a quick message to the landlord. Second, instead of spending the extra $3,600 a month on ownership, I invested that money in the financial markets. In the end, I made more money renting and investing the difference than I would have by buying the property. No trips to Home Depot, no remodeling projects, no leaking faucets to fix. Just peaceful living, contacting the landlord when necessary, and investing $3,600 each month. I'm not claiming your financial situation will mirror mine, but purchasing a home without first crunching the numbers is a major mistake. You should factor everything in. The home you're considering, property taxes that are likely to increase, unexpected maintenance expenses, including, say, a $25,000 roof repair a decade from now. Everything needs to be accounted for upfront. Mortgage payments, opportunity cost. Use these calculations to determine the real monthly cost of owning, and then compare that figure to the cost of renting a similar property. If ownership proves much more expensive, it might be wiser to rent and invest the difference. On the other hand, you might find that buying makes more sense financially. If so, great. But I want you to understand the math before making one of the most expensive decisions of your life. Now, regarding buying properties to rent them out, it can be profitable, yes, but you must have a firm grasp of the numbers, and in my experience, most landlords fail to properly calculate or manage their finances, let alone run the property like a business. In fact, more than half the people who seek my help with financial troubles are struggling primarily due to two things: housing costs or car expenses. Buying a house should be seen first and foremost as a purchase, a very costly one, and only secondarily as an investment. And why is this perspective crucial? Two main reasons. First, risk. If your home represents your largest investment, what happens to your portfolio's diversification? Think about it. If you're paying $2,000 a month toward a mortgage, are you also investing $6,000 a month elsewhere to balance the risk? Of course not. The second reason is that, generally speaking, returns on real estate investments for individual owners are relatively low. Yale economist Robert Shiller found that from 1915 to 2015, home prices grew on average only 6% annually. It might sound surprising, but the data backs it up. If building wealth is your goal, I'd suggest starting by investing in a 401k, contributing to index funds, and letting compound interest do its work. Later on, if you wish to add real estate to your portfolio, that's perfectly fine, but do it as part of a diversified strategy. And if you want a house to live in, treat it as a meiji, or purchase, not an investment vehicle. Now there's one final part left. Before moving on, if you've made it this far, make sure to subscribe to the channel, as we have lots of new content offering fresh perspectives on money. So, here we are. At part 4, is buying a home ever a good idea? I want to be clear because I've been criticized before by people saying, I believe no one should ever buy a home. That's simply not true. I actually plan to buy a house myself someday. And as I've mentioned, it will likely be a poor financial decision, but I intend to do it anyway. What I oppose is making bad financial choices based on blindly following the crowd without doing the math. So, how am I preparing to buy a home? I'm asking myself 5 important questions, and I recommend you do the same. First, will I stay in that location for at least 10 years? All the transaction and closing costs need to be spread out over a decade to make sense financially. It's similar to buying a car. It immediately loses significant value the moment you drive it off the lot. The same happens with a house, though no one talks about it. As soon as you buy, you're down tens of thousands of dollars. Spreading those costs over 10 years increases the likelihood of a good financial outcome. Second question, will my total housing costs be less than 28% of my gross income? Here's why we use gross income. Some people contribute heavily to their 401k, and we want a fair comparison. Why 28%? Traditionally, that's been considered a safe threshold to manage risk. It's hard to stay under it. Perhaps you could stretch it to 32% or 33% in expensive cities with low debt. But be cautious, as higher percentages mean higher risk and less money for other needs. Third question. Have I saved 20% for a down payment? I'm not saying you must put 20% down, but being able to save that much shows you can consistently save, a critical skill when owning a home. Fourth question, if my home's value drops, will I be okay? Real estate prices fluctuate naturally. Even during upswings, you could lose money when you account for all the costs involved. So don't buy expecting to get rich quick through home appreciation. For many, that never happens. However, if you're prepared for potential value changes and buy with the right financial mindset, aiming for a place to live rather than an investment, you may be ready. Another important question, am I genuinely excited about buying a home? Many people I talk to feel discouraged because they were taught that owning a home equates to success. They hear that renting is throwing money away, and they end up feeling like failures. But renting does not make you a failure. I could buy property today if I wanted to, but I choose not to. The key is feeling in control, doing the math, and making the right financial decision for your life, without being influenced by what your parents, friends, or society expect. You are the one who determines what's best for your journey toward financial prosperity. And if, while answering any of these questions, the answer is a firm no, then maybe, perhaps this simply isn't the right time for you to purchase a property. I hope this video helps you save money and build the wealthy. life you aspire to have. Now take a look at the next video to deepen your knowledge even further. If this content resonated with you and helped bring more clarity to your financial decision-making, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell to continue receiving valuable tips on how to build your wealthy life intelligently and consciously.